see all of us now. Thank you so much.
There we go.
All right, we are on.
Okay, we start. How's the audio?
I guess. Peace, everyone. I was just gonna go over a few things that happened on July 3rd. I guess we can start off with some of the things that the media had put out into the public. One of the major things, I'll just give like the bullet points, and Jamal can talk about the rest. I'm Jaleesa L, by the way. I'm Jamal Guadalupe's wife. And so one of the things was the state troopers claimed that the men were just arbitrarily on the highway armed already when they arrived, which the video evidence that they've already played multiple times in court proves that that wasn't the truth. Thank you.
Just one bullet point at a time so that way I don't forget to mention something. So, as far as that, at a certain point in time when the police blocked off the highway and they started turning off their lights, so I didn't know if there was a first sheet that I did not know. I told them to go into the tree line. My guy was going to the tree line so he got a big get us. And during the 68A, the dangerousness hearing in Massachusetts Superior Court, the prosecutor said that the reason why Trooper Casey got behind us was because we were already out on the highway with guns, and that's the same thing that the media was saying. But during this last hearing, what day was it? May 10th? Yeah. During the May 10th motion to suppress hearing, Trooper Ryan Casey took the stand under oath, and I asked him, when you got behind us, was there anyone out on the highway with guns there? And he said no. And then I said, let the record reflect that the prosecutor and the news media has lied, saying that, we were already out on the highway with guns. And that's part of the reason why that they found me dangerous, was because the judge just believed that we were just already out on the highway blocking traffic. So the reason why I mentioned that us going into the tree line earlier was because the police arbitrarily blocked traffic. And Trooper Casey on the stand testified that he was just delaying the stop in order for them to have more police to show up. Before we were even under arrest. And that's in open court, so all you got to do is check the record of the court and see that they've been lying and he took the stand.
I got you.
What else is it?
I think you should go over some of the things to do with the suppression, because I think that covers a lot of the situation now. But I think you can also let people know what your list of charges was in the beginning and what it was after. The list of charges that they provided to you at first, and then what it is now.
So on what I was arrested for was disorderly conduct. What I got indicted with was all types of, unlicensed possession of a weapon, possession of a high-capacity feeding device, possession of a high-capacity something, the wearing of body armor during the commission of a felony, improper storage of a firearm where a minor had access to, and I think furnishing a false name or something like that. So, as far as the false name thing, if you look up on the United States Justice Department Criminal Resource Manual 1508, it specifies that a driver's license is not ID, and that a nationality card is preferred over a birth certificate, a driver's license, or a state-issued identification card that's only valid in the United States. So they really have no basis of claim of stating that my identity is anything but what I told them I am. And what was the other thing you want to be able to address besides the charges?
I'm not sure what I said at this point, but
Yeah, that's why I said if you could do it one point at a time, it'll be easier, so that way I don't forget.
yeah. Okay. Well, I'll ask you this, or I mean, maybe Maj has a few questions for you. But do you believe you're above the law? Because that was one of the biggest things.
Do I believe I'm above the law?
Do you believe you're above the law? Because that's one of the things that's been put out into the media.
Well, what proof do I have that I never said that? And how could someone even claim that I believe I'm above the law if I'm trying to use the Constitution as a defense, and I was asserting the Constitution on the highway, and I was asserting United States Code, United States law on the highway. So how does one deduce that from that?
I think when I was going back over and looking at the various news articles and things like that, they basically say almost like you were claiming to be a sovereign citizen and above the law, that sort of thing. It was kind of inferred, but there was never any evidence in the video of that you guys took beside the road. I personally didn't hear any of that in there. So if you could just touch on how you feel that you were right to travel from your home to private land, and how they disagree.
So you can look up. There was a newspaper article written in I think it was New Hampshire, and it was like the New Hampshire Sun or something like that. They had asked me about the sovereign citizen thing back in like 2019 or something like that. And I addressed that as well. I said, how could I be a sovereign citizen if, when they violate my rights, I try to go to federal court to resolve it in court? If I was a sovereign citizen, I wouldn't believe in the courts. I wouldn't believe in the Constitution. You know, it doesn't even make sense. If I believe the law doesn't apply to me, how could I go to a court of law and apply the law if I don't believe it? That doesn't make sense. You know, but what they're doing is they're taking facially constitutional laws that are actually unconstitutional, claiming that they're laws, and if you disagree with that, then they say that you don't believe in the law. You get what I'm saying? And an example of that is all the people that opposed slavery. If we were back then and we opposed slavery, they would say, oh, you think you're above the law.
Correct.
So,
you know what I'm saying? That's basically essentially what they're doing.
Can you elaborate a little bit for, the people who might not know what Massachusetts general law says about open carrying, and what the Constitution says about open carrying, and where the conflict lies, and what it means when state goes against federal?
Basically, if you look up, and this is what courts do. This is even with the District of Columbia versus Heller case in 2008, where the Supreme Court finally stated that the Second Amendment is an individual right, whereas from 1876 up until that date, state courts and federal courts have been unconstitutionally sending people to prison under the guise that the Second Amendment is not an individual right. That all started with, and you can look this up in the Young versus Hawaii case, which is one of the cases I was referencing on the highway. If you read that case, you'll see that licenses, the entire idea behind licenses and licensing the carrying of arms, that was created in 1724 with the Christian Black Code, stating that black nigger slaves could not carry any weapons without permission from their masters. Now, when they were starting to abolish slavery, the southern states applied licenses to quote-unquote free slaves or free Negroes. So whereas everyone else had the right to just open carry their arms and just have it and carry it, ride their horses with it, and quote unquote brandish it, and quote unquote possess it without any licenses, the only people that the state was enforcing licenses on were quote unquote free slaves and quote unquote white abolitionists who wanted to abolish slavery. So only those people were forced, were regulated as it relates to carrying arms, because they were using those arms to fight for their freedom, which is exactly what the Second Amendment is for. The Second Amendment is to fight against tyranny. So they were fighting against the tyrannical system of forced slavery. So in order to combat that, the same way a lot of these, let's just throw Hitler out there. The same way Nazi Germany disarmed the Jews in order for them to be unable to resist what Nazi Germany was doing to them, was exactly the same thing that the Southern slave owners were doing to the white abolitionists and the black slaves who wanted their freedom. They were disarming them by saying, you need permission, which a license by law is permission. You need permission to bear arms. Whereas everyone else had what they call the right to bear arms, which a lot of these other states, they call it a constitutional carry, which means you don't need a license to just have your gun. And as an example, before, and I'm pretty sure you've seen it on our Instagram, Not the Moors Militia, before they deleted our Instagram and our YouTube, I had called the Kentucky Police Department. I said, hey, my name is Jamal. I'm in charge of a local militia. We're going to be on this street at this time, and we have arms. We're wearing militia gear just in case anyone sees us. It's us. And we took our rifles, shotguns, sniper rifles, and we patrolled to our training area publicly, open arms, open carrying arms, which is completely legal. The cops came around 4 or 5 times and no one was arrested. Why? Because the open carrying of arms is not a crime. It can't be a crime. Someone would have to be hurt in order for it to be a crime. Even in Massachusetts in 2009, the Supreme Court of Massachusetts in Commonwealth versus Young stated that the unlicensed possession of a firearm is passive, victimless, and does not create a disregard for the safety or well-being of others. So how is it a crime?
Absolutely.
And then they use things like these past terrible shootings to say that guns are bad. No, guns aren't bad. Guns in the wrong hands are bad. But then when they license the carrying of arms, criminals don't go through the legal process to get guns. So they're only affecting law-abiding citizens. And then you see where the law-abiding citizens got affected, like with this Texas school shooting. The police wouldn't even let the parents who were willing to save their children, wouldn't let them go in with arms to save their children. But the police were able to save their children. You know what I'm saying? And then the people are confused, like, how come the police aren't protecting us? How come they weren't protecting these children? But when you look up the United States Supreme Court and even state courts and federal courts have consistently ruled that no state, local, or federal government, which includes the police, has any obligation to protect anybody unless you're in their custody. So the Second Amendment literally is so that you can protect yourself, because the police can't do it. Because no one can do it, because it's based off a natural pre-existing right. And when you even look it up, you just look up the case law on it from the Supreme Court, they even state that the Second Amendment didn't grant a right, it didn't confer a right. It simply established what was already pre-existing and stated that the government can't infringe upon it. Why? Because we all have the natural God-given right to defend ourselves. So now if the United States Supreme Court is saying that the police have no obligation to protect you, then who does? You do. By what means? By bearing arms. What's an arm? Well, by law, an arm is anything that a man or woman or child wears or has or possesses in his or her hands to defend themselves. That's what an arm is. And this case law, federal case law, you look up the Miller versus Bonds case, June 4th, 2021, literally a month and a day before we got arrested in California. Look at that entire case law. It even talks about how, just as easily these rifles, they're called high-capacity weapons, or they're called, dangerous weapons. They could just as easily be called anti-crime guns or safety guns. You get what I'm saying?
Exactly.
People need to have a rational look at what's going on and the laws that are actually in play, and not just what they feel.
So
because people are losing their lives because, if there was a militia at that school or in the neighborhood of that school, it wouldn't have.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Jamal, can you hear me? Jamal? He might have got kicked off the phone.
Gotcha.
That happens sometimes. He will call back. Let me see if I can. Let me see.
Absolutely. Take your time.
Jamal? I hung it up. I'll call you back on the phone, or should we keep it like this? I don't know what sounds better. I know there was like...
If you guys can hear me fine, we can just keep it like this.
Okay. Can't hear you. I can hear you. He can't hear you. Sorry about that.
This is a prepaid collect call from...
It's just going to go through a little prompt really quick. It'll take about 40 seconds, but I guess I'll... Do you want to fill in here, Maj? Or I can go over like some of the things that I was going to bring it back to mention to him.
You can go ahead once he comes back on. I'll have a couple more questions for him.
Okay, thank you.
If this is an attorney-client call, attorneys should hang up and call 978.
So right now, they're basically calling anybody who knows their rights a sovereign citizen, which is like a blanket term for, anyone that they might see as a problem for them. I'm about to get him on right now. Hi.
Yeah, you said the minute warning. I didn't hear you.
No, it wasn't. I couldn't hear you anymore, and I was calling you. So hold on, let me get Maj on the other line so that way you can hear him. Because hold on one second.
All right, I'm back.
Okay. I'm working on... All right, I think it is. Honestly, I don't remember, but I was gonna try and bring it back to... I just mentioned right before you got on the line that they've been using the term sovereign citizen as a blanket code for anybody who knows their rights. Also, I wanted to mention that just because... So in Massachusetts, I wanted to just focus really quick on the Massachusetts general law because it's the biggest thing that people are holding on to. Massachusetts general law, there are exemptions for who can open carry, and a trooper doesn't know, one, whether or not you have a license to carry or not in the first place. Two, you're allowed to carry... you're allowed to travel with your arms, but the biggest thing, like I said, was the carrying thing. But there are exemptions. They don't know whether or not you have an exemption. A militia is an exemption. Hold on one second, Jamal. I just wanted to make a really quick point. And anything... So speaking of sovereign things, all states have sovereignty. Everyone has sovereignty through the state. So that means they have the right to go ahead and make their own constitutions. All of those said constitutions have to be in accordance with the federal constitution that already exists. If it contradicts what the federal constitution says, it's by law null and void. And what'd you say?
I said notwithstanding.
Do you want to mention a little bit about those exemptions of who can and cannot carry, and this?
Yeah. Well, for one, it states in Massachusetts general laws that militiamen are exempt from criminal liability. That's number one. Civil or criminal liability. That's number one. Number two, it reinforces that in 129C, letter M, which again exempts military men, which when you look up again, the Massachusetts General Law Title 33, it specifies what is a or it says the military is exempt, and then it specifies that the military force of the Commonwealth is the organized militia, so that's the National Guard, the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, Coast Guard, all that. And then the unorganized militia, which is everyone else. Literally everyone else who's a militia member, that's the unorganized militia. You know what I'm saying? And it states in Massachusetts law that those people are exempt from criminal liability. Mm-hmm. It literally says that. And then when you look at Supreme Court case law, Supreme Court decisions, it literally specifies that the people are sovereign, and that sometimes the people have sovereign immunity, and that's an example of that. When the people are organized in a militia, then they're exempt from criminal liability. You get it? That's an example of sovereign immunity. Or another example of sovereign immunity is if someone's trying to take your life, and then in self-defense you take theirs, you're immune from being charged with first-degree murder or even second-degree murder because it's self-defense. So now you have sovereign immunity. Absolutely. That's exactly what that is. That's exactly what that is. Even your right to vote is based off your individual sovereignty. As a free human being, your right to vote, your right to participate in government, that's what distinguishes the free people of the Americas and oppressive monarchies. That's the absolute difference. And if you look at Supreme Court case law, which I even filed this with the courts, you'll see that. You'll see it consists. There's even federal Supreme Court judges who said the only sovereignty in this country is the people, and I recognize and acknowledge no other sovereignty except for the people. It even says in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, and that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their power from the consent of the governed, which means what? The people being sovereign gave government officials a little bit of sovereignty to preserve and protect their rights, and that's their sole job. Literally. Absolutely. So to claim that we're a sovereign citizen because we're enforcing our rights is like equating the founding fathers to sovereign citizens because they were enforcing their rights against Great Britain. And then I even asked Trooper Casey on the stand, you called me a sovereign citizen. What is a sovereign citizen? He said, well, a sovereign citizen is someone who one, doesn't have a social security number, and two, doesn't believe laws apply to them. Before 1935, there was no Social Security Administration. So before 1935, no one had a Social Security number, which means the founding fathers, by his definition, must be sovereign citizens. The founding fathers also believed that Great Britain's laws don't apply to them, so they also must be sovereign citizens.
So,
but they use the term in a negative, pejorative way. And these terms like. I don't want to go into a list of terms, but these phrases and these little pseudonyms are created to cause division. Knowing that most people don't know what a sovereign citizen is, or number one, what sovereignty is, and number two, what citizenship is, and how by saying sovereign citizen that doesn't really make sense. Since people are unaware of it, they associate that unknown with now I'm going to associate. I don't know what that word means or what that phrase means. That means I don't know anything about this person. Now, this person is entirely questionable, so now you get to question if rights apply to this person, to these people, or that person or not. It's the same thing that they did with COINTELPRO by calling, people like Martin Luther King Jr. A terrorist. Mm-hmm. It's the same systematic oppression that they've been doing for years. They do it over and over and over and over and over again. Even the whole argument of who's on the left and who's on the right. They've been doing that since COINTELPRO, and they admit that the COINTELPRO tactics were tactics that they learned in World War I to create dissent within nations to topple government. Which they're just using the same tactics to topple the progress of our people. Now, again, if our people were bearing arms, or if just people in general were bearing arms and forming militias around that school in Texas, they could have responded within minutes. It took the police an hour. Absolutely.
Jamal, I don't want to cut you off. I don't think we have.
One more point. Even with the shooting in New York, there was a security guard in the store. He tried to stop the guy, but he was outgunned. So what if there was someone who tried to stop the guy at that school? Guns can save lives. If you read the Miller versus Bonta case, you'll see that where they go over several cases where a pregnant mom had to defend herself from people invading her house. Just things like that. Like they go into detail about how firearms have saved people's lives.
Definitely. So I did want to ask, as far as like your lawyer, you were appointed a lawyer. I read or seen somewhere that you fired the lawyer and you're representing yourself. Is that the case, or are you being forced to have a lawyer?
I've been pro se since the beginning. Then they tried to force him on me. I fired him. Then they realized that they couldn't just get away with what they're doing because of the thing that I was filing on the record. So then they had a colloquy hearing in order to kind of clean up their mess. And then I accepted him as standby counsel. Since then, during the May 10th hearing, I tried to fire him again because as standby counsel, instead of telling my wife, I'm going to do my very best to get your husband home, he said to her, be prepared to be a single mother for 2 years. What kind of fucking lawyer says, excuse my language, what type of person says that?
Wow.
Prepared. Court said, possession of a firearm alone does not cause reasonable suspicion. Which means, if I had a firearm and I was acting erratic, or I was acting scared, or I was acting aggressive, or I was trying to run, or trying to do something like that, then that would cause reasonable suspicion. But I wasn't doing any of that. And I even asked him, during this incident, was I aggressive? Was I hostile? Did I point anything at you? And he said, no, 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 and no. And then even when the second officer showed up, he said, they're being cordial, they're being compliant, things like that. So by law, based on this motion which was 61 pages that I wrote myself in jail by myself with res judicata, with stare decisis from state and federal courts, proving that they violated my rights, proving that I have a sound legal argument, this should be dismissed. But we already know how these people get down. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to avoid. So this is where they play games with people, right? Because the United States Supreme Court already said that essentially the state police, not just state police, state, federal, municipal governments have no obligation to protect you, which means the police have no obligation to protect you. But they're trying to claim that Trooper Casey was engaged in a community caretaking stop But community caretaking is not supported by Massachusetts statute. That's police policy. There's a huge difference. You get what I'm saying? Because the Supreme Court already said they have no obligation to protect you. So community caretaking falls outside of your scope of duty. Not only that, but the federal courts and state courts have consistently ruled that community caretaking is completely separate and divorced from the acquisition, questioning, gathering of evidence in relation to violation of criminal statute. So either way they try to dice it, they violated the Fourth Amendment and they violated Miranda rights because Trooper Matt McDevitt was asking, are those firearms according to federal law, and do you have licenses for those firearms? Which that's testimonial evidence, which would warrant a Miranda warning, which they never gave. So the news is not going to say that.
Right. And you answered, so you were cooperating. And when you asked him if you were cooperating, he said yes as well.
Yeah. And then I even asked him, so when you said sit tight, were we free to go? He couldn't answer. I forgot what he said. He said some bullshit. He said something like, I don't know what I would have done if you would have tried to leave. We all know what you would have done if we would have tried to leave.
Right.
We would have had our back to you and you would have shot us in the fucking back.
Did we address...
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, so from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's not really a case against you. It's just, I'm just processing everything, but it doesn't really sound like they have a case against you. They're just kind of holding it.
Right.
Yeah, they're riding the wave of the media propaganda that they put out.
And since court,
they were calling us sovereign citizens, and
they were calling
that we
terrorists.
Were terrorists. So they're not going to just let us go.
The court of public opinion is so important, and they know that, which is why they lie blatantly in the media. But also, since people think, because the media is saying and the police are saying they're sovereign citizens, or some people said domestic terrorists, since the court already has that opinion, they're not going to care if they're just holding an innocent man for no reason. Everyone's gonna acquiesce, basically consent via acquiescence, so that way, they're bad guys, who cares, lock them up and throw away the key. So that's basically what we're at this point, excuse me. Jamal, did you address the fleeing to the woods thing? I think I lost him again. Jamal?
Yeah, I think he dropped again.
Yeah. Okay, I'll call you back. Sorry about that, folks. They listen a lot to the calls in the jail, and sometimes they do hang up, like if you say, I don't know, certain things, and they might not like what you say. They hang it up. Sorry.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from...
And the other lawyers, the other standby counsels for the other men that were incarcerated were 7 out of 10 are released on bail. They all made the same choices and decisions, and they're all home free. Jamal's public pretender did admit to me that he has other clients with the same exact charges who are home. So what they're claiming is basically the biggest charge they're clinging to is high capacity magazine at this point. And then, which that's already covered in Miller versus Bonta as well.
932-3111.
And also they're claiming that he is the mastermind, which I would understand if he was a mastermind of this bank robbery or a school shooting or anything crazy, but they were literally going camping, and even the state troopers said on the stand that they pulled out camping gear.
Yeah. And let's talk about the fact that 9 of my co-defendants have bail.
Right. Let me get Maj on the other line so that way you can hear him when he's going to ask you questions, because I think we addressed a lot of the main issues. One second. Okay, everybody here?
Yeah. Have bail. Not only that, but if we were domestic terrorists, we'd be being charged with terrorism. We're not being charged with terrorism. We're not even being charged with pointing, the brother from NFAC, right? He allegedly pointed a firearm at an alleged cop, so they brought him to federal prison for doing that. We're not even being charged with pointing anything at anyone, which was the entire point of us going live, so that way they couldn't just murder us and get away with it.
Absolutely.
It's proof that they would have attempted to do that with what they're doing in the media. If we didn't go live, it would have just been their word and that's it. But since we were live, now the people could see something different. And the fact that I had body cam footage, the people are going to see something different.
And the fact that if you were actual terrorists, you would be brought into federal court and not rinky-dink district court.
Yeah, we would exactly. State courts don't have jurisdiction over the charge of terrorism. If anyone would read the United States Code, if anyone would read the laws that they're claiming we don't believe in, that we've read, then they would know that if we were being charged with terrorism, we'd be in federal court, not state court.
Correct.
It's ridiculous.
So what can we do? Like, what can we do to help you? Where does your case stand, and what can we do from the outside to help you?
Well, one is the Firearms Policy Coalition, the people that were part of the Miller versus Bonta case, is also trying to get the legislator to change the very laws that I'm facing right now. The whole unlicensed possession, high capacity crap. They're trying to get them to declare that unconstitutional. So one thing people can do is participate in that. Another thing people can do is highly emphasize the fact that they're violating our Fourth Amendment rights. Period. Because if you don't, that means the police can, at any point in time, initiate a quote-unquote community caretaking stop, which is based off of nothing, and then turn it into the investigation of any criminal activity, even if you're not even doing anything.
Absolutely.
You get what I'm saying? Because that's essentially what they're arguing was this was community caretaking, and then they turned it into an investigation, which the federal courts, state courts have already ruled that you can't do that. Which is why they had to argue that we were already out on the highway. You know what I'm saying? So people can participate by doing that, and of course, number one, learning actual constitutional law and jurisprudence. Parents. So some of these laws appear to be valid. They may even be commonly enforced, but that does not mean that they're constitutional.
Correct.
Just like slavery was commonly enforced, slavery appeared to be valid. They were using the Bible and saying that, based on anthropology, it's better for Negroes to be slaves. It's in their own interest. So it appeared to be valid. But then when you held it to the Constitution, which declared all men free and equal, they said, you know what? It's actually not valid. Same thing with the Second Amendment from 1876 to 2008. Imagine the hundreds, if not thousands, of people that were sent to prison for bearing arms, and the court's rationale was, the Second Amendment is not an individual right, only until 2008. So how many years is from 1876 to 2008? How many years is that? Of people going to jail, going to prison, under the color of law, under the quote-unquote rationale that the Second Amendment is not an individual right, only for the Supreme Court in 2008 to argue with precedent from the 1800s saying that it's always been an individual right. That's the danger of the people being ignorant and the people just accepting anything that these quote unquote officials say. And then now they use things like, since I said quote unquote officials, they're gonna say, oh, see, he doesn't believe in the government. No, it's when you're charged with protecting the people's rights and if you deliberately violate those rights, you're no longer a government official. You're a tyrant. That's read the Declaration of Independence. It says it right in it.
Absolutely.
It even says when the government becomes destructive to those ends, which is protecting your rights and liberties, then it's the obligation of the people to abolish it. All you got to do is get rid of, impeach the people that's violating the Constitution. That's all you got to do. It's not that hard. Don't re-elect them. It's not that hard.
As far as like your conditions, your treatment, are they treating you well? Are you?
So, me, I'd have to say, yeah. But they're only treating me well because the media is focused on me. There's other Moors that have been spit on. There's other Moors that have been verbally assaulted. There's other Moors that have had to clean up blood of other inmates. There's other Moors who've certain CEOs will say, "Oh, you're a disgrace to our race," and then they would make them beg for food. So don't base it off of just me. There's 11 of us.
Absolutely.
So of course they're gonna, since they're putting all the focus on me. Oh, he's the leader. They're gonna make sure I'm okay. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That's just how they move. We have to remember these people are snakes. If you read the Art of War, all war is deception. So they're just gonna keep deceiving and deceiving and deceiving.
It says the live is paused on my end. I don't know if it's paused. It might be fine.
Nope.
I was going to ask Jamal if you wanted to touch really quickly on, because one of the big things too was the media had heard that some claimed that they weren't U.S. citizens, and what the proceeding and debates of the 90th Congress is, and does that make you a sovereign citizen?
So, again, people don't know what a sovereign citizen is.
Right.
If you're a citizen, you have to be a citizen of some nation. So if I'm a sovereign citizen, which nation am I a citizen of? Right? Secondly, the United States is a collection of European British colonies from Europe. And those European colonists from Europe claimed independence from Britain and then formed their own separate colonies. And they were called the 13 colonies of the United States of America. So when you hear the United States of America, also think European colonies, because that's exactly what the proceedings and debates of their own Congress refer to themselves as, European colonies. And then with the abolishment of slavery in 1865, with the Dred Scott case in 1857, if I'm not mistaken. No, hold on. Before the abolishment of the end of slavery, I think. What year is the Dred Scott case? 1857?
I believe so.
1857.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court Justice, what was his name, Taney or whatever, declared that blacks were never meant to be citizens of the United States. And that's a true statement because the United States is a collection of European colonies. We're not European. So, of course, their colonies weren't meant for us. It was meant for them, right? But since our people were ignorant, and some of them still are, we thought that was a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? Now, in the 1960s, well, it really started after the death of Prophet Noble Drew Ali. The Civil Rights era, the height of the Civil Rights era was in the 60s, right? Martin Luther King Jr. said it himself that he integrated us into a quote-unquote burning building, right? And then, the modern argument of so-called blacks is that we're being treated as second-class citizens, which relates back to the Supreme Court Justice case where you said blacks were never meant to be citizens. Even the fact that the Senate and the President have to negotiate every few years for blacks to even have the right to vote proves that we're not U.S. citizens. The fact that in the year 2000, over 1 million black people's votes weren't even counted during the Bush election proves that we're not U.S. citizens. And then when it comes to the proceedings and debates of Congress, when you look at 1967, which is the height of the civil rights movement, where blacks are trying to integrate into the United States, saying, treat us as first-class citizens, the proceedings of the debate of the 90th Congress, first session, volume 113, part 12, June 12, 1967, page 15641 to 15646, clearly and specifically explains in detail how the 14th Amendment is not constitutional, right? And it even explains how there was a coup within the United States. There was a military occupation of the southern states, and then during that military occupation of the southern states, certain senators weren't allowed into Congress to cast their vote regarding the bill of the 14th Amendment, which means the bill wasn't even passed by both the House and the Senate, which means it couldn't have been ratified.
Also, the president
right?
didn't get to, it didn't come across his desk either.
Well, it did. The president vetoed it.
Okay.
And they admit that in the proceedings of debate. And then in the same proceedings, the Congress even explains how at that time the war had been over and the southern states were re-entered back into the Union and officially recognized. And without the southern states, the 13th Amendment wouldn't have been ratified. You know what I'm saying? So it clearly shows that the southern states were fully integrated into Congress, and that because of them, the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, was ratified because they agreed to it. And then the congressman even referenced the dangers of the terms and phrases used in the 14th Amendment. So not only does it declare unconstitutional, it makes the same argument that we're making by saying there's a difference between people and person. Now, when you read the First Amendment all the way up to the 13th Amendment, it talks about the rights of the people. Once you read the 14th Amendment, it starts talking about person. There's a difference between people and person. And you can just not only look that up in any legal dictionary, but if you go to caselaw.findlaw.com, if you go to justia.com, and you just search the difference between person or the types of persons, the Supreme Court, the federal courts, and the state courts, even state legislators in their definitions during in certain statutes explain that there's two types of persons: an artificial person, 3/5 of a man, and a natural person. You get what I'm saying? So even within the 14th Amendment itself, the Congress in 1967 explained how it's dangerous. You know, so this isn't a new argument. This is an argument that's been made since at least 1790 with the 73 Moors Act in South Carolina. You know, so that's the issue of our citizenship in these quote unquote United States, and it doesn't just affect so-called black people. It affects so-called Spanish people too, with ICE and all these Americans being deported. Even when you look at the Treaty of Guadalupe, Hidalgo in 1848, before the United States stole basically the entire West Coast from Mexico, it even specifies in that treaty that Mexicans have rights to be here because the entire West Coast is Mexico. You know, which that's regarding the quote unquote manifest destiny of these European colonists who took over what we refer to as the United States now by war. That doesn't mean it's right. We're conquered peoples, and then we're defending them based on the miseducation that they give us. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
and then we complain about the mass incarceration of our people. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Maj, do you have any other questions that you want to ask?
No, I asked, what we can do. I was very helpful. I'll make sure that I edit that part and put it on all the different platforms so everyone can help. If you can give out your donation information, I did put part of it in there, and I'll place it in the comments as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I think, being on the right side of history, one, two, recognize that what they can do to one, they can do to everyone. What they can do to one, they can do to all. So,
you wouldn't believe the type of people that are in jail who literally have done nothing. And some of them are sitting right next to me right now. Wow. It's sad. Very sad. And for a book that I think every one of our people should read, that every single person on this planet should read, is called The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, I think.
Absolutely.
It's a great book. It's a great book. It's also a disgusting book because it it really shows you how how disgusting this quote unquote criminal justice system is and how unconstitutional it is.
And just try. I mean, we have to take a stand against oppression and tyranny, and we can't just let government roll over us. We can't just allow some of our rights to be taken away from us, because once you detach the Constitution, the whole thing is going to come apart. They're going to come for everything else. So, stand up for your rights before we don't have any. Like, our biggest mission is, and I'll say this really quickly, and then I'll say like the payment information, the donation information or whatever, is that COINTELPRO is a very real thing. It says that its purpose is to stop a quote-unquote Black Messiah from nationalizing and militarizing, which is something that we very much are about. So, one, there's that. Two, FBI has been involved in trying to get Jamal in jail for a while. There have been other attempts. They've also called his personal cell phone. They've asked people questions around us. And this is years ago, maybe 2 years ago now. Ask people who have come to the class just to learn their rights, like where they learned this information, and they'll say things like the Constitution, the library, but they just want someone to say, this is the guy who taught me this. But it's like, we're opening books and we're showing people what the books that they wrote say.
Yeah, right. You go
Also,
to court and go to the library and courts and pull out these same books, and it says the same exact thing.
At the law library. Also, and FBI has gone to some of our associates' houses, to ask them questions. And so, exactly. And then there was a recent incident where some women from the community came to us. They came to us through Black Lives Matter. They knew that we were in court a lot for other people, to help them. So they brought these women over so we could give them some help. Their children were being taken away without warrants by CPS, Child Protective Services, and things like that. They don't speak English. They don't know their rights. They just know that what's happening is wrong. So we went, they had held a protest. This was that, like, the winter. This was in February, right before all of the Black Lives Matter protest had started. So this was February 2019, I believe. The women held this little protest. It was a little group. Brown, the Ivy League Brown University was there. Black Lives Matter was there. A lot of college students were there. The women were there, and then we were there to provide a formal complaint in the office at the State House. So at one point, just to be really quick, because I don't want to drag this out, it's a long thing, but someone that was with us made a comment about a cop's head being bald. They body slammed him and arrested him for no reason, because, even though the comment wasn't a kind comment,
You have 1 minute
that's
left.
violating his First Amendment right to freedom of speech. So everybody was upset. We came in out of the building a couple of times. Jamal, call back. I'll just wrap this up really quick. He got arrested. We left. A week and a half later, National Grid shows up to the house, rings the doorbell, asks me if they can trim trees. Doesn't even ask me if I'm the owner. I was, but didn't say anything. An hour later, somebody else rang the doorbell, and it was another man, but he had on a reflective vest with a clipboard, and he was asking me if the previous guy that was here gave me the coupon program. Mind you, I never opened the door for anybody, but for some reason that day I did. And he was acting very erratic, spastic. You could tell something was wrong. And since I was young, my dad always taught me, like, defensive things to protect myself. Always have the bottom lock locked. Always have your foot up. So if they, bait and switch tactics, no one can smash your door in. So I had my foot up. I saw someone in all black running up behind that man, and I immediately closed the door, and I yelled up to my husband and our one of our brothers who was here. And I said, we're getting robbed by crackheads. They came down the stairs. I looked up. There were about 5 to 6 men in all black on the porch. No cop cars in sight, no police badges, no state police, nothing. But they claimed they were state police, and they claimed they had a warrant for me. So I was very confused because, you know, I don't have any criminal record at all. I know I haven't done anything to deserve a warrant. They didn't provide me a warrant. I went upstairs to grab my iPad. They flashed it to Jamal for maybe a second or two. He wasn't able to confirm that it was a warrant. So they ended up smashing the door down and arrested the 3 of us. And then when I went into state court, the district court,
Thank you for using
they claimed that
You may start the conversation now.
hi, they claimed that I had been fist fighting state troopers in the state house. They made that claim even though someone made a comment about a cop's head being bald. He got arrested, but I fist fought multiple state troopers, and they allowed me to go home. And then the Joint Fugitive Task Force team shows up to my house a week and a half later. It makes no sense. And then so they let me go on personal recognizance. But since this whole thing was a mission to get Jamal's body, they placed 20, and again, the warrant was supposedly for me, and they let me go without paying anything. And they put $20,000 bail on Jamal and our other brother. Yeah. So this is like a long, you know, Jamal has helped get at least 12 cases from court jurisdictions in Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. I want to say at least 10 or 12. He helps people get them dismissed in court, and courts don't like that. So it's been, you know, this ongoing, they've been basically trying to get us with anything. There was also another incident in Providence where, Jamal, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Where Jamal was giving a weapon safety class in our office, and people signed up to be there to learn weapon safety. And we were on YouTube, I think, and it was live, and somebody, you know, whether it's a troll or someone who doesn't like us or whatever it is, someone called the police. So somebody had left the class and called us immediately and was like, the police is outside. So I went down to go look, and cops were literally stacked on the building, ready to raid the entire building. Without a warrant, without going off of hearsay, knowing that it was live, which they could have looked at it, and
no one was a danger.
yeah. And later on, you know, we went outside, read the Constitution, the state and federal. The supervisor had come and said, you know, we don't even have any standing to even go in there in the first place, you know, to try to save face and yada yada yada. But so, like I said, it's been this ongoing thing of them trying to do anything and anything to stop us from helping people and to stop us from teaching people what the actual law is and to stop our progress, really.
Yeah, can I mention something real fast?
Of course.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, there's 3 branches of government, right? Each branch checks and balances the other branch. But what people fail to remember is the 4th branch of government is the people, which checks all 3 branches. And that power is protected with the First and the Second Amendment. If the First Amendment doesn't work, then you have the Second Amendment to rely upon to enforce the First Amendment. And that's just a fact. And if you look at just the foundation of the United States, that's exactly what they did. They tried using their words with Great Britain, saying, please take our delegates so that way they can speak for us. That's the First Amendment. And then when that didn't work, they said, okay, well, we're gonna keep trying to speak, but now we're gonna carry these guns. And once that didn't work, then we already know what happened next.
Yeah,
and that's the course of all free people throughout history. They've done the same thing, and they've done that to also maintain their freedom. Which, you know, these are concepts within martial arts that are taught. You know, you give your verbal warning, and then when that don't work, you defend yourself. You know, this stuff isn't foreign. It's not. This isn't. I'm not making this up. These are natural